Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, depending on where you're tuning in from around the world. Supatease here again with another PvP guide, and in this one I'm going to be going over Disciplined Priest against damage over time classes like a Balanced Druid and a Shadow Priest. So in this specific matchup, you want to focus on elongating your mana for as long of a fight as possible to give your team as many opportunities for an opening, because these compositions have a lot of defensive cooldowns to rotate through, and you need a lot of time to be able to get through all of that. So at the start of the game, of course, you want to get Atonement onto all three members of your team. So you're going to use Power Word Shield onto all three members. After that, what you're looking for is for your rogue to land some sort of crowd control like a sap. And as soon as that is landed, you want to be focusing around your Dark Archangel button. This will boost the damage of your team, and then you immediately want to use any unused trinkets and Solace Penance to maximize your damage in the opener. And you can see huge amounts of pressure early on forced a huge amount of massive cooldown overlaps. So you want to coordinate that, get the atonements up as soon as possible to get that big burst damage off. After the crowd control chain, I used Fear to deny any support from the Balanced Druid while we continued the attack towards the Shaman. Now in this position, it's unlikely that we'll find a kill. Earthen Wall Totem is down for the Shaman, which reduces a lot of pressure. So I opted to cast Mind Control to crowd control him and hold him at a lower health for as long as I could. Obviously they broke up that crowd control, and now I'm focusing on keeping my atonements up and trying to get my Purge the Wickets out onto multiple targets. And I'm also aware of Incarnation from the Balanced Druid. So this is a powerful cooldown, that blue icon next to the name Yumi. This is when the Balanced Druid is at his scariest and his most formidable point. This is when you want to be telling your partners, I'm crowd controlled. Think about using Cloak of Shadows. Think about Cauterize, Ice Block, as those are the classes that I'm playing with in this specific matchup. And they trigger Cauterize, so I'm saying still think about using block. Crowd control ends, and because I'm playing Twist of Fate, it boosts the healing of my instant cast Radiance and allows me to stabilize just long enough to chain into Barrier. And I'm running the Dome of Light Honor talents, and you want to be using that during Incarnation, usually before Cauterize and before Ice Block if you can. But if you're crowd controlled, obviously you're going to be using it towards the end of that crowd control chain just to last the Incarnation, which is 30 seconds, quite a long time. After you've restabilized, I use Dark Archangel in this position to recover, not so much to keep pressure, comboing it with the Solace to try and maximize the healing on my team. I should be using Smite a lot more in this position. I'm still just trying to maximize Solace usage to get mana regeneration. This Psychic Horror stun is the start of a crowd control chain, so I use Pain Suppression before the chain starts because I can't use it in a silence. Unfortunately, Pain Suppression wasn't enough in that situation, and Ice Block had to be used as well. I'm ducking around the corners out of line of sight because I don't want my mage to cancel the Ice Block, and I don't want to try and get crowd control. Unfortunately, Shadow Priest positions to land more crowd control on me. So my team, they're in dire straits. They're all really low health. I need to apply Atonement, and I need to use Penance to start restabilizing. Shadow Mend is a spell that you only want to use in dire situations because it's so mana intensive, but going around the corner and topping off in this situation seemed like the right move. I should be doing a better job at keeping my Purge the Wickets up. You can see refreshing those on all three targets to maximize its incoming healing, especially when I'm crowd controlled like this in a Cyclone, and those Purge the Wickets will continue healing for me on any atonement targets such as the Rogue in this position. It allowed him to be a lot more durable, so you really want to make sure you're keeping up your Purge the Wickets as much as possible against Shadow Priests and Balanced Druids. Try and coordinate with your team when they're going for swaps. For example, there I could have used the Dark Archangel during the stun on the Shaman, and we could have pulled more damage or potentially more cooldown. So as a Disciplined Priest, you really have a lot going on. You need to avoid crowd control. You need to try and initiate with your team with damage. You need to try and recover. There's a lot going on along with your mana management. So as soon as you come out of crowd control chains and your low health, Radiance is kind of your go-to. That will apply Atonement and also just heal them a lot. It really just gets you energized at the end of a crowd control, and you want to make sure you're waiting until they're in Twist of Fate range to use that Radiance so it gets the extra boosted effect of that heal. Once you've sort of recovered, you would want to avoid Shadow Mends, but with the positioning of their team and my team and not wanting to break Polymorph, it's too difficult to actually smite, so I'm just using Shadow Mends, and I opt to use Cloak of Shadows. as obvious as it was there. My rogue would have died otherwise. And then during this moment with the smoke bomb, I see the stun. I try and coordinate the Dark Archangel. It gives us just enough damage to kill him before the stun ends, and he can use a critical defensive cooldown to survive. So the stun earlier, I could have done that. It was a misplay to not, but on this stun, using the Dark Archangel allowed us enough damage to kill him. Unfortunately, they continued their crowd control chain just long enough to actually end up netting a cross kill. This composition is a much different playstyle for Discipline Priest to face against, and it's something that I'm looking to improve on myself, but I wanted to give some insight into it for you at home who may be struggling with it, because it is quite a large task to juggle, especially on Discipline Priest against these compositions. Generally speaking, what are we going to take from this? Keep your Purge the Wicked up as much as possible on as many targets as possible. Keep your Atonement up as well, and press Powered Solace on cooldown. It does you a lot of damage, and it also regenerates you mana to keep you moving into a long game. When you're crowd controlled, you want to be telling your partners to think about using defensive cooldowns. During Incarnation, you want to be using the Barrier cooldown and or Cloak of Shadows or Ice Block if absolutely necessary. Those cooldowns you usually let sit until it's absolutely necessary, but Barrier, it pairs up excellently with Incarnation. I would suggest that in general. So I hope that this guide is of use to you. Thank you for tuning in and watching it, and I will see you on the next one.